everyone, my name is Kirsten and I am a third-year student at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, otherwise known as CCNM, in Toronto, Ontario. And today I'm going to be answering your popular questions about the NPLEX Part 1 exam. So for those of you who are interested in learning more, stick with me in this video. I am going to answer the most asked questions by you guys. I have been asking for your questions for a little bit now, so I want to answer as many as I can and hopefully cover that for you guys. So let's get right into it. But I just want to start by saying I do have a video I previously recorded about the overall idea and concept of the NPLEX Part 1 exam, or NPLEX in general. So you guys can go click the link that I have on the screen here and watch that video first if you want an overall idea of what NPLEX is like, and your support just means the world. So let's get into it. So a really popular question a lot of people want to know is if NPLEX is mandatory. And no, it's not mandatory if you want to practice in Ontario. So NPLEX is mandatory if you want to practice anywhere outside of Ontario. So essentially, in a little bit more of layman's terms, if you want to practice in Ontario, you must write CONO, which is a completely different licensing exam. It's separate and it's just specifically for Ontario. But if you write CONO and practice in Ontario for 3 years, I believe, then you can go on and practice in other provinces in Canada, but you cannot practice in other states, from what I'm understanding. NPLEX is necessary if you want to get right out there and practice in anywhere in North America. If you don't really know what you want to do once you graduate or where you want to go, I would recommend writing it. It really just gives you more freedom. If there are options out there when you graduate, you can just go wherever instead of having to worry about missing out on those opportunities because you don't have the licensing. And another question relating to this is if you have to take it right after your second year, and no, you do not. Make sure you do all your research, but this is what I'm going to tell you from what I actually do know, and it's that you don't have to write directly after your second year, but the sooner you write it, the better, because the information is more fresh in your mind. So when you write NPLEX Part 1, it is based off of your first 2 years of your naturopathic medical college experience. And so I would say that it probably makes most sense to write it as soon as possible when that information is still fresh in your mind. I mean, you really are still going to have to relearn a lot of information because you learn a lot in 2 years, but at least at this point, the information is a little bit more fresh. You can kind of just top it up, and it makes it a lot easier than having to go back after learning third year information and having to apply that. So totally think it's really helpful. And studying for the exam, honestly, has been super helpful for me to understand everything again that I learned. And now I know I can apply it to my third year, and it will probably make the year a lot easier for me. So I'd recommend doing it as soon as possible, but no, you don't have to. You can write it after second year. You can write it after third or fourth year. Totally up to you, what you're comfortable with and what works best for you. But keep in mind that you cannot write Part 2 until you've written Part 1, and there are only 2 times in a year that you can take NPLEX. NPLEX is available in August and February of every year, and there are no other options. So if you want to take it, you have to take it in those time points. So keep in mind, if you're planning on writing Part 1 after your 4th year, that you will have to write that Part 1 in August and then wait till February at least to write your second part. Another really popular question from you guys is what resources to use for the exam. And I will say that this is very individualistic, but I do have a few recommended resources. The first one being Dr. Anderson's Guide to NPLEX. You can just Google Dr. Anderson NPLEX and his course will come up. He does a really good job at breaking down all of the stuff you need to know for each section, the really important stuff that maybe you wouldn't think about prior to or on your own when you're studying. I really enjoyed watching his videos and going through his notes because they were really helpful, and he really helped me kind of narrow down the type of information I need to know. And he used to be on the board of writing questions for NPLEX, so he has a better idea of what to expect. There are unfortunately not any specific textbooks for NPLEX, so a lot of the resources you study from are based off of USMLE, and that's because that is what the medical doctors study from, and the exams are quite similar, but it would be nice to have a specific naturopathic medical examination kind of textbook. So hopefully one day somebody makes one of those, because that will be perfect. But anyway, so this is the USMLE Step 1 textbook. And I use this quite often, almost every single day. It has a lot of high yield or important information that maybe you wouldn't think about going into the examination, and it really helps break down that information as well. You can get this textbook online used. I wouldn't recommend buying it new. It's just not worth it. They only add a little bit every year. I got this for like $30 on eBay. Just make sure you're getting it from a reliable source. But yeah, don't spend too much money on this textbook because you will spend it on the exam, and you will spend it on other resources. Another resource that I recommend is Board Vitals. This gives you a good idea of the type of questions that you might be asked, but it also just prepares you for writing the exam and seeing the type of questions that you might get on the examination. So it really helped break that down. You can time yourself during examinations. You can choose different sections of the body to study from so you can see where you're stronger or where you're weaker and where you need to improve. So it's really helpful in that sense. And then the last resource I'm going to recommend is Osmosis. If you are a visual learner like myself, then Osmosis is going to help you. And this goes for like all of naturopathic medical school, because Osmosis is just a great way at putting all of those concepts you learn into pictures, and they do it in a fun way, so it makes it a little bit easier to learn. So I totally recommend Osmosis if you haven't used it before. It is a membership as well, so that's something to keep in mind. But again, all these resources, if they're going to help you, are worth it in my books. I don't really like spending money, but unfortunately this examination takes that away from you anyways. And then going on to the next question, how much does it cost to write NPLEX? So writing NPLEX costs approximately $600 to $700 Canadian. I think it was like $400, $500 American. And so depending on where you're writing it, that's how much the exam will cost you for just writing the exam. But keep in mind, you're going to be paying for other resources like your textbooks and your softwares. So you end up spending anywhere from $700 to $1,000 on this examination. When it comes to your resources, I would say just be wary of studying solely from your class notes, because you don't necessarily learn it the same way you might need to for the examination. I recommend following the NPLEX guide they give you of all the kind of questions that you need to go over, the things you need to know, and then going over the quizzes they give you. This exam is quite difficult to prepare for, and honestly, the questions on the exam were not what I expected them to be. I don't really know a resource that 100% or even like 70% was as accurate to what the actual examination looked like. So again, that's the most difficult part of this examination, is there's really no resource to go over what you would see on the exam. So just be prepared for that. Keep your head up and keep pushing through studying for the exam, because it's worth it and you're going to feel proud of yourself regardless of the end result. So routine was a really, really big part of my examination process. Mindfulness is honestly what got me through the examination. Maybe you're not really into meditation or journaling or all that kind of stuff, and that's okay. But finding a routine that helps you be grounded, and stay true to yourself is really, really important, because during an examination like this, studying for 3 months, 2.5 months, 1 month even, is a lot of work. It's very, very exhausting, and so you need to be able to find what makes you happy, what makes you feel connected to yourself, because if you're not connected to yourself and if you're not feeling your best self, you're not going to be having good study sessions. And so keep that in mind, that bad days are going to happen, and that's okay. Just know that your worth is not based off of this examination. So my routine really looked like waking up in the morning and really, really focusing on my morning routine. And that was meditation, journaling, reading a little bit, working out, doing affirmations. Those were really, really big parts of my day. So I typically didn't start studying until 10:30 in the morning, because most of my morning was based off of my routine, and I will stand by that like forever, because it doesn't matter how much you study. If you are not staying connected to yourself, you will not see the success that you want on this examination, and I think that's so important to keep in mind. No exam, no mark is worth your mental health. Ever, ever, ever. Another question that I received was how I dealt with the nerves and the anxiety coming up to the exam. And yeah, that was something I found very, very tough. And so how I coped with that was using visualization. And what I did is I would sit with myself, I would close my eyes, and I would picture myself walking into the exam room the morning of. I would put myself in that position of what it would look like, who would be there, how I would be feeling, and how I could bring myself back to being grounded in that moment. And I did that every morning, probably the month leading up to the examination. And that really, really helped me prepare for what to expect on exam day, how I actually might be feeling, and how I can actually come back to myself rather than being fully nervous. So if I let myself feel what going into the exam felt like every single day for a month, I was more prepared for it than just kind of not dealing with that until the actual exam day. So I knew what to expect for myself. I knew what feelings might pop up in that moment, signs of doubt and anxiety, and I learned how to cope with that, and that was really, really helpful. And then on top of the visualization, I did affirmations. So every morning I would repeat affirmations, I would write them down, and I would say them to myself, sometimes even in the shower so that I was multitasking, and I would just really feel connected to myself. I would make sure I was visualizing washing away all those negative feelings and really feeling empowered in myself and where I was. So regardless of what the exam brought up, I made sure to stay connected to myself and to prepare myself for those moments. And I think that was one of the keys to my success mentally during this exam. A big question that I received is how many weeks people typically study for. This varies between different people, but for me personally, I studied for about 12 weeks for this exam, which is quite a long time, but I definitely recommend it. I wouldn't recommend doing much more than 12 weeks because then you're just kind of getting to the point where you can overthink things. And they say 4 weeks is possible as well. Some people have done it in less. And I mean, if that's you, that's amazing. Me, I know that I needed that time. I needed those 12 weeks to really be connected to myself and to really get the most out of my studying, and so it worked for me. Some people study for 8 weeks, which is okay too. And then I know that people who go to school in the States and even in BC, they don't get the same summer break that we do at CCNM, and so that's a little bit more difficult, and they didn't have the same time that we did. And so yeah, I would recommend getting studying as soon as possible. 4 weeks seems very stressful to me, but people do it and they make it happen. So all the power to those people, because I cannot do that. I could not at all. I would say between 12 to 8 weeks is the ideal amount of time you want to study for this exam to really get prepared and to be able to fit each system. And that's how I broke it down. I usually did 1 or 2 systems each week. And when I say systems, they break the exam down into like cardiovascular, respiratory, reproductive, all those kind of body systems, and like microbiology, all that stuff. And so each week I was doing different systems. Sometimes it would be 1, sometimes it would be 2. So I really like this question. Somebody asked me what I would recommend or if I would recommend anything during actual class in school throughout the first 2 years of our program to prepare for the exam. And this is something I'd never really thought about before. I kind of just told myself I would worry about the exam when it came, which maybe isn't the best way to approach it, and maybe it is good to kind of prepare. I wouldn't say start studying like first and second year. Don't do that because you're just going to burn yourself out. However, I would maybe make sure your notes are organized in a way that you could possibly use them. I would recommend, like in microbiology, making lists of all the gram-positive bacteria and gram-negative bacteria, focusing on the characteristics of each bacteria and putting those in charts and organizing them that way, because that would make it really easy to study when it comes to studying for NPLEX. However, if you do it how you learn in class, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So making those charts early so that you can use them later would be perfect. Same with clinical medicine in second year. You could probably break all of that down into charts as well, and that would be really helpful for studying, especially if you're a visual learner in this case as well. This next question asks how to mentally prepare for this exam, and this kind of is similar to my question about routines and that kind of thing. But I will say also on top of that, to just make sure you go into it with the positive outlook that regardless of how much time you spent studying, even if you don't pass the exam, it's okay. One exam does not dictate who you are, how smart you are, or how capable you are. The exam is hard, and sometimes you get a harder exam than expected, and that's okay. Like, that's not your fault. You've done what you can. As long as you put in the time to study, the work to study, that's all you can do, and there's no reason to beat yourself up. You can write the exam again, and although that's not the ideal situation, it's still an option. You can write the exam 3 times total, and so I just want to say, don't stress yourself out too much. because in the end, then that's just going to totally take your focus away from the actual exam and you won't be able to perform how you want. So totally okay if you fail the exam. Just go into that with the mindset that you're not going to fail, that you've totally already passed the exam, but it's always an option to rewrite and it's not a big deal. It's okay. We are human, and one exam with 200 questions does not dictate how good of a doctor you will be one day, I promise. So I think that's it for this video. If you guys have any more questions about NPLEX after this, no worries. I am always willing to answer your questions. So head to my Instagram. I'll link it below and you can send me a message. I'm always happy to answer. I honestly love when you guys message me. It is so fun to be able to connect with you guys. So let me know if you have any questions and I will do my best to answer, get back to you as soon as possible. I am a busy gal, so give me some time, but I will get to you eventually. And thank you guys for staying tuned to this video and for asking these questions. And I am so thankful for all your support and appreciate you guys so much. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.